talk about 3 historical anecdotes, and then I'm going to give a conclusion at the end. I'm going to talk about these stories of Emmett Till of Chicago, Willie James Howard of Florida, and David Walker and his entire family of Kentucky. In 1955, Emmett Till, who was from Chicago, Illinois, was visiting his relatives in Money, Mississippi. Emmett Till, a 14-year-old black boy, went into 24-year-old Roy and 21-year-old Carolyn Bryant's grocery store to buy some candy. Allegedly, Emmett Till said something to the 21-year-old white woman, Carolyn Bryant. Maybe "bye, baby," as he left, or he whistled at her, but his friends denied that he said anything at all. Several nights later, Carolyn Bryant's husband, Roy, and his half-brother, J.W. Millam, went to Emmett Till's great-uncle's house and abducted the boy. And then Roy and J.W. Millam, Roy Bryant and J.W. Millam, beat Emmett Till until his body was mutilated. Then Roy Bryant and J.W. Millam shot and killed Emmett Till and sank his body in the Tallahatchie River. 3 days later, Emmett Till's body was discovered and retrieved from the river. The jury didn't convict Roy Bryant or J.W. Millam, nor did the grand jury indict them for kidnapping, even though during the trial, Roy Bryant and J.W. Millam admitted that they kidnapped Emmett Till. They got away with it, scot-free. So, because of his interaction with Carolyn Bryant, whether he whistled or said "bye, baby," or did nothing at all, she goes to her husband, Roy Bryant, and he gets the brother-in-law, which I guess is her brother. So it's her brother, it's her husband, J.W. Millam, and then they kill, lynch, murder, mutilate, beat the crap out of, shoot Emmett Till dead. And this was actually a pretty popular case. On January 1st, 1944, in Live Oak, Florida, Willie James Howard, 15-year-old black boy, had innocently flirted with a 15-year-old white girl, Cynthia Goff, who they worked together, who worked with him in a white-owned five-and-dime store called Van Priest. And he had a crush on her, and that crush would ultimately get him killed. Earlier in December, Willie James Howard had given Cynthia Goff a Christmas card, and he signed it L. Willie James. L meaning love. But Cynthia Goff seemed a little vexed by this, and to make up for it, Willie James wrote Cynthia Goff a note of explanation. So on January 1st, 1944, Willie James Howard handed Cynthia Goff his note of explanation. And it said this: "I know you don't think much of our kind of people, but we don't hate you all. We want to be your all's friend, but you won't let us. I wish this was a northern state. I guess you call me fresh. Write and tell me what you think of me, good or bad. Sincerely yours, Willie James Howard." To Cynthia Goff. P.S. I love your name. I love your voice. For an SH meaning sweetheart, you are my choice. Willie James Howard wrote. Willie James Howard was the one black boy in the black part of town whom everybody seemed would do well. He had that certain je ne sais quoi to him in Live Oak, Florida. And it seemed like he actually had a shot to do something good because of his good nature, his good sense of humor, his intelligence, his respectable quality that he had about himself. He was also a really good singer, and he was very popular. Everybody called him Willie James. Cynthia Goff was the same age as Willie James. They were both 15 years old. She attended a segregated school just a few hundred yards from the black school that Willie James went to. Cynthia Goff showed the note to her father, Alexander Phil Goff, who was a former state legislator. And Alexander Phil Goff didn't like it. He was enraged. He was pissed. How dare you be interested in my daughter? So a 15-year-old white girl shows it to her white daddy, and now her white daddy gets two other white men, Reginald H. Scott and Selden B. McCullers, and drove to the Howard home. On January 2nd, 1944, 15-year-old Willie James Howard was ripped away from the clutches of his mother, whom he was clinging on to, on the front porch of his own home, and he was dragged away at gunpoint, because these three white guys were going to take Willie James to the Suwannee River. Willie James's mother said, "I tried to pull him away," later on in an affidavit, and I also kept pleading and asking what Willie had done. Lula Howard's affidavit reads, "By this time, Mr. Goff," and she says Mr. Goff, so she's still showing respect for Alexander Phil Goff, had pulled out a revolver from somewhere on his person and leveled it at me. I ran after the car, which got away from me. Willie Howard was hogtied. Old Willie James Howard, the 15-year-old black boy. He was hogtied, bound by his feet and hands. Alexander Goff, Reginald H. Scott, and Selden B. McCullers then went to the Bond Howell Lumber Company, where James Howard, the boy's father, worked. Alexander P. Goff picked up James Howard and headed to the Suwannee River, 8 miles outside of town. When the three white men, Willie James and his father, reached the Suwannee River, that's when James Howard knew that his son wouldn't leave alive. James Howard told his son, "Willie, I cannot do anything for you now. I'm glad that I belong to the church, and I'll pray for you." While being propped up at the river's edge, Willie James was made to stand at the edge of the river, where, according to his father's testimony, he was told that he could either jump in or be shot. So James Howard, they go to the edge of the Suwannee River, and they did this in front of James Howard, right, in front of his father. And then they offer their ultimatum to Willie James. Alexander Goff puts the revolver to Willie James's head and told him, "Jump in." Willie James hesitated for a moment, so Alexander Goff pushed Willie James's head in anger, then shoved Willie James into the Suwannee River. Then the four men all watched Willie James struggle and thrash about in the water for a minute before his lungs finally submerged and got filled up with water. And then Willie James's body stopped moving. Alexander Phil Goff, a former state legislator, Reginald H. Scott, and Selden B. McCullers all forced James Howard, the father, to watch his only child drown to death. And then the three white terrorists took James Howard back to work, and they ordered him to finish his shift as if nothing had happened. And he did. When he came back home, he didn't want to tell his wife, Lula, what had happened, but after a while, James Howard told Lula Howard, "Willie James ain't coming back." Later that evening, Alexander Goff, Reginald H. Scott, and Selden B. McCullers signed a written notarized statement that gave their version of what happened to the sheriff. They admitted that this thing happened. And according to the signed affidavit, Alexander Goff, Reginald H. Scott, and Selden B. McCullers on January 2nd, 1944, took Willie James out of his home and to the Suwannee River, intending to only get James Howard, his father, to discipline Willie James for getting fresh with Cynthia Goff. Alexander, Reginald, and Selden all admitted to hog-tying Willie James to keep him from running away while he was being whipped by his father. Why'd you have to go to the river? Why couldn't you have just had him whip him at his home? A lot of holes to this story. Then they claimed Willie James became hysterical, and in spite of being hog-tied, somehow he jumped into the river himself, and he drowned himself. Suicide, they said. A tragic but accidental suicidal drowning. Alexander Goff, Reginald H. Scott, and Selden B. McCullers alleged. Under the threat for his life, James Howard also signed the affidavit supporting Goff's version of events. 3 days later, Lula and James Howard sold their house in Live Oak and moved to Orlando. Willie James's body was pulled from the Suwannee River the very next day and buried immediately. There was no funeral for Willie James, no final farewell. No arrests were made, no trial happened, and of course the grand jury didn't indict. Governor Spencer L. Holland was told by a special prosecutor that the 3 white men were guilty of first-degree murder. But the governor of Florida, not only did he not intervene, but he actively covered it up. Spencer L. Holland covered up a murder. Later on, you'd have Harry Tyson Moore would investigate this case, and he, too, would be killed. And he was a famous civil rights activist. Now let's go to David Walker. Now, David Walker, he is the patriarch. He owns 21 acres, which may have been the reason for why he was attacked. But this happened in Hickman, Fulton County, Kentucky, in western Kentucky, on October 3rd, 1908, at the hands of about 50 anonymous night riders. After Patriarch David Walker refused to come out of his house, the lynch mob poured coal oil on his house and lit it afire. After David Walker tried to plead for the safety of him and his family, he walked outside. His body was riddled with bullets. The same thing happened when David Walker's wife came outside holding a baby in her arm. She held in her arms their infant child and begged the night riders for mercy. Disregarding her pleadings, the infuriated mob opened fire. A bullet pierced the body of the infant in the mother's arms, and a second shot struck the mother in the abdomen, and she fell still holding the dead body of her infant. Then 3 children came out, and they were met with the same fate. And David Walker's eldest son, however, refused to leave the burning log cabin, and he preferred death by burning than to place himself at the mercy of the mob. So it's probable that his charred body will be found among the debris. Now, there's some speculation about what the reason was. Supposedly, 7 people were killed, maybe 8. There's also a possibility that 1 or a few of the children had survived. But the reasons aren't very clear. The Fulton County Night Riders justified their murders because David Walker had swore at a white woman, or he got into an argument with a white woman. He said a cuss word, and it upset her greatly. Oh, I do declare. Another possible reason was that Walker had a bad reputation. He was a surly Negro. So fuck him, right? Like Alton Sterling. And guess what? Tomei Loren, she says fuck Alton Sterling's life. He went to prison for 5 years, so he's a convicted felon. He's a fucking criminal. He smoked pot. He had to go to jail for 5 years. She doesn't see that as a system fucking over his life. She basically says, who gives a shit? Who cares if the shooting was unjustified? He was a bad guy anyways. He was a surly Negro. He had a bad reputation. Another possibility was that David Walker's neighbor wanted to take his 21.5 acres of land from him, because after David Walker was killed, the neighbor that was adjacent to him absorbed all of Walker's property into his own. The neighbor sold it to another man, and today that man's daughter owns it, and it just sits there, remains undeveloped. So those are 3 anecdotal historical pieces, which goes to my explanation about what kind of person is, Tomei Loren. So Tomei Loren's, her popular comments are dangerous. 60 million people watched her. 60 million people. George Wallace, 50 years ago, had 10 million people that voted for him. The reason why I think that these 3 historical anecdotes are important is because of how white supremacy works. And the way white supremacy works, I don't know if it's the white men. I don't know which one's the bad person in the partnership. I don't know if it's the white men convincing the white women that they need their protection from the big bad black guy. That big black man, It also makes me think about the word nigger. And it makes me think about how Baldwin, Mr. Baldwin, I forget his first name right now, but I've seen this a bunch of times, but he says essentially he knew growing up, James Baldwin, maybe, in the 60s or 70s, he said growing up he knew that he wasn't the nigger. He's like, yeah, that's what you're saying, but I know that I'm not. I'm a respectable person, and what you're saying about me just isn't right, that it just isn't true. So where did that idea come from? he says that if what people put on others is really a reflection of themselves, then the white supremacist or the nigger. So perhaps white supremacists were thinking about their own basest emotions, thinking about how they act, how they think about women, and putting that on black men. And probably adding some extra shit too. But the beastly monster that was created, that the word nigger represents, was constructed in the mind of a white supremacist. And so, I don't know if it could go the opposite way. The white man could convince the poor, innocent, pious, docile white woman, these black men are going to get you, but I'll protect you. Or the white woman could have just been raised with a racist father, so she adopted her racism, and then a man falls in love with her, and then she pops off this racism, and then he either has to accept it or not accept it. So, you know, there's two different ways there. Let's go with the male, okay? Let's go with the patriarchal society, because that was typical. And so the white male supremacist, the white supremacist who's a male, is protecting the innocence, the piety, probably the docility, the submissiveness. Oh, poor white woman. She's so delicate and precious. She could never do no harm. She is above reproach. She is a good, solid human being. She couldn't harm a fly. She is just so wonderful and perfect, and, you know, makes me feel insignificant compared to how great she is. So white males are racist because they're protecting white womanhood. And do the white women who get protected by these white supremacists, do they object to that? Or are they flattered by that? Or they're like, oh, please do protect me. I don't want them to get me. Please protect me from them. Because when you look at these crimes, these murders of Emmett Till, Willie James Howard, and David Walker's entire fucking family, they didn't commit any crimes. One argued with a white woman, possibly said a cuss word in front of her. Whoa! He said a cuss word. Hold the phone. One possibly flirted with the white woman. Hey, baby, whistled at her, or said nothing. Or they just talked to a white woman that wasn't pleasing to the white woman. Wrote her a love letter, sent her a Christmas card. And because those are the interactions of the black men with the white women got their white men to murder, mutilate Emmett Till's body, shoot him through his body into the, Tallahatchie River. And then Willie James Howard, his body is thrown in the other river, Susquehanna. Tallahatchie River is Emmett Till, and the Suwannee River. One's in Mississippi and the other one's in Florida. And then the other person was David Walker. And it wasn't just David Walker who got the punishment. How dare you say a cuss word in front of my Scarlett O'Hara? My Scarlett O'Hara, she never done nothing to nobody, and you're going to say a cuss word? She was greatly upset about that, and so not only we're going to lynch you, we're going to lynch your wife, we're going to lynch all your kids. Because that's justice, right? Say a cuss word in America, the land of the free, home of the brave. Say a cuss word, and therefore your whole fucking family gets wiped out. Maybe there might be a kid that survived, but they definitely didn't get the land. So I'm just wondering, do white women object to their white men's racism, or do they love it? Do they secretly love it? Are they flattered by it? Do they, because if the white woman is up on a pedestal and she's so special, if she was to say, hey, don't be racist, don't judge people by the color of their skin, judge them by the content of their character. It's obvious. That's, I thought that was settled 50 years ago. They would listen, or they would go on, or she'd get beat up, if it's patriarchal old school days. Maybe I was out of fear, but that's something else to consider. So he's saying be afraid of the boogeyman out there, so I'll protect you, but if you call me a liar, I'll beat the shit out of you. So is he protecting her from So, you know, I could see either one of them being bad. I've known women who are racist, white women who are racist. I know white men who are racist. Ida B. Wells, she wrote this book, and she wrote the book called Southern Horrors, Lynch Law in All of Its Phases. Essentially, if there was the allegation of rape, you know, even though it was extrajudicial, the horrible crime of rape, automatically black man's hung. He's dead. He's killed. Good riddance. And a lot of black folks, because of their seemingly silence when it comes to lynchings, I mean, they're terrorized. They're scared. I mean, that's the point of a lynching, was to put black people in their place. But they would be silent, and when someone said, well, he raped that woman, that's why he got killed, well, you know, he raped her. He shouldn't have raped her. That's okay. We'll take that excuse. We'll take that reason and go on. Now, Ida B. Wells, she started to investigate this, and that's why she wrote this pamphlet, actually, not a book, The Southern Horrors, Lynch Law in All of Its Phases. And then she followed up with an editorial that suggested that, unlike the myth that white women were sexually at risk of attacks by black men, most liaisons between black men and white women were consensual. After the editorial was published, she left for Memphis for a short trip to New England to cover another story. While she was gone, Daily Commercial, Evening Scimitar were like, the fact that a black scoundrel is allowed to live and utter such loathsome calumnies is a volume of evidence as to the wonderful patience of Southern whites, but we've had enough of it. Doesn't sound like you're very patient there. And then while she was away, a white mob destroyed her offices, the offices of the Free Speech in the Headlight. So Ida B. Wells went around investigating how many of these so-called rape cases were legit rape. And she said most of them weren't rape. Most of them were consensual. And if these are plantations, this is segregation. So but if that's a sharecropper, she has power over the black men, then that would be rape. That would be, you know, a kind of rape, right? Using your authority in order to get sexual favors. If she is the boss and you have to listen to her go hoe the garden, do you have to listen to her to go lay in bed and get ready for her? I think so. It's a very, please, Mrs. Scarlett O'Hara, I don't want to do this, Miss Scarlett O'Hara. Please don't make me do this. So, the idea that white men are protecting the goodness of white womanhood. So, white woman having consensual sex with her black sharecropper. So, she's essentially raping, right? Abusing her authority in order to get compliance. The white woman, instead of admitting to their racist white daddies or their racist brothers or neighbors or cousins or whoever, found out that the truth was she's fucking a black man. Oh my God, a white woman's fucking a black man. It couldn't be consensual. Don't, please, Scarlett O'Hara, tell me it's not consensual. Instead, that good, precious, pious, wonderful angel, a child of God who could do no wrong, she lied. And the black man who had got raped by the white woman was then lynched. So it's ironic that white men are protecting the piety, morality, and gentleness of white women as if she could do no wrong, but in these cases where the white woman raped the black man, who apparently, at least for that night or series of nights, she loved that black man. She loved him. At least his body. But apparently her goodness and her love and her piety and morality and gentleness had limits. The good, pure, pious, moral white woman would then watch them lynch that black man that she had once loved. It seems weird to me that I have to say that sometimes white women can do bad things. I don't want authority. I don't want power over anybody. I'm neither a slave nor a master. I hate oppressors of any stripes. So but I feel like I do need to say this. I feel like I need to say it because when Tomi Lorraine is sitting there spewing her shit, you know, all it took was an argument to get the entire family fucking lynched. The entire family of David Walker was killed because of a cuss word that was uttered or an argument. and because of a Christmas card, or because of possibly being whistled at. Very tiny infractions, very small things, and all she had to do was complain, and then that man lost his life. So I think she's either intentionally or not, but trolling for assassins. Her words are very dangerous. And I wish she would just shut up, really. I mean, but it's a free society, so she can be stupid if she wants to be. Just like the religious. They can be stupid if they want to be. That's your right as an American. Be stupid. But anybody else, don't listen to what stupid people say. Know what she is doing. She's exploiting racism and race relations. She's against, Jesse Williams, his speech at the BET Awards. She's against Beyonce. She says Alton Sterling deserved to die. Black Lives Matter is like the KKK. She's got a history and a record of taking the white supremacist side of any controversial, so-called controversial race thing that happens, including this Copernic thing. Now, know that she works for the Blaze, which is a Glenn Beck outfit. So, Tommy Loren, she's that Glenn Beck bitch. She works for some network that Glenn Beck started or works for, or something, I don't know. Something to do with Glenn Beck. She's a Glenn Beck bitch, and Glenn Beck, he's a McCarthyism. He's a Red Scare, Jay Mitchell, J. Edgar Hoover, look for the communist kind of guy. Root him out. Glenn Beck, like lots of those Fox News guys, were just trolling for assassins for Obama. They're still bitching about Obama. They cannot stop bitching about Obama. Like he's the worst fucking guy that's ever existed on the face of the planet. They'll say, you think he's a messiah. Well, you all think he's a devil. I'm kind of 50-50 on him. Tomei Loren may not say she loves David Duke or the KKK, but I guarantee you that David Duke and the KKK love her. The KKK and the neo-Nazis have found their new leader. This blonde-haired, blue-eyed Aryan Nation bitch. It seems like she's trolling for assassins just like Glenn Beck is. It's his network. So it's like multiplicity. The clone of a clone of a clone is just this weird Frankenstein sort of, handicapped creature. And she's out there, 60 million fucking views. And the only worst racist that I could think of, because all of those were pretty bad. Every single one of them. That Carolyn, whatever, with Emmett Till, and then all of them, every single one of them. And all three of those anecdotes, right? So all of those white women were pretty crappy human beings. But that's, again, Cynthia Goff, let's go to that 15-year-old. Did she know her dad was going to do that? Or was she just supposed to be obedient and do whatever Dad says and then showed it to her and then Daddy went on a tangent? So I could see both ways happening, but she didn't stop it. Maybe I don't know if we can blame her for that. But if she knew that he was racist and if she was a racist herself, then I think that she's a part of that. She went ahead and said, hey, look what happened with David Walker. Hey, this guy, cussed at me. Okay, well, then his entire family needs to die. All 7 of them. The only worst racist case I could think of that happened recently was that old white bitch. And, she's a bitch. She's a bitch. She's a privileged white bitch. Living in this society, I feel as though a woman has other women who's got her back. And if they don't, then I feel sorry for them a little bit. If you're an attractive woman, I'm pretty sure you got some male friends. But, everybody's got different lives. It's tribalistic. But in general, and it's bad to generalize, but I'm going to do it anyways. I feel as though men love women, women love women, and nobody gives a shit about a man. Nobody gives a shit about a man. I almost think homophobia is so strong that people won't like a status, on the Facebook. If I like his status, well, he think I'm gay? or they'll go this way. Oh, my God, I liked his status, and I'm turned on by that. Ooh. Their gayness comes out, right? So the only worst racist I could think of that happened recently was that old white bitch who was at the apartments, and she was looking with binoculars at the black folks who were barbecuing, and then the black dude didn't like how she would harass his mother and was constantly a nuisance, and now she had her binoculars, right? Just being an asshole, just being a shitty dick. Clearly doing it, not hiding it. Yep, I'm staring right at you. Yep, I'm watching you. I got my eye on you. And the black man didn't like it, so he goes in with the camera. He's walking towards her.